Om Nichanam Chetanas Chetananam Eko Bahunam Yo Vidadhati Kaman Tamatmastvam Yenupashanti Diraha Tesham Shantihi Shashvati Netaresham Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. That one who is the eternal in all non-eternal things, and who is the intelligence of even the most intelligent ones. The wise perceive that one who, though one and indivisible, yet fulfills the desires of the many. The wise perceive that one as their very own self. To them belongs eternal peace, and to none else. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all living beings. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. So welcome everyone to the next installment of the Encomium verses. And we are in verse 12 or 13 right now. And where we left off, we had been studying the 11 characteristics of Maya, and we're launching into the 20 truths of truth. Let's review the verses that go with this, and then we will continue. One moment here. Okay, so backing up just by one verse, our poet sage, our teacher, says, early along the superlative way, my gracious guru came forward again to warn me about the 16 evolutes of Maya. I perceived them prevalent throughout relativity and got free by studying the 10 fundamental tenets of Samkhya. For those who weren't with us when we studied the 16 evolutes and the 10 fundamental tenets of Samkhya, what these do is they show us that Maya is always changing and evolving, and that the Purusha, or the Atman, is changeless. So holding that in mind, let's move on to verse 12. Thereafter, the 11 main characteristics of Maya were rendered clear to my intelligence. This knowledge inspired me to recite the 20 truths of truth daily with heartfelt devotion. So in order to know how profound a practice of reciting the 20 truths of truth, or even just meditating on a few of them, let's back up and take a look at what those 10 or 11 characteristics of Maya are. Again, this is all about being able to perceive the changefulness of nature. So the first thing is that it is eternal, for it exists even after pralaya, which is where the gunas go into equilibrium and everything is formless. It's the great sleep before the next cycle of projection. It is illusory since it creates illusion in the minds of living beings. And so if we begin with the fact, the statement of the seers, that reality is changeless, unmoving, does not transform, has no beginning, middle, and end, it transcends the concept of time. If we start from that position, then anything that is changeful, that is divided, etc., that appears in our mind, that has diversity, then that is going to be illusion. I always like these sort of logical ways of looking at things. It's sort of like creating these proofs like we had in geometry back in high school. So if the nature of reality is formless, but we're seeing form, if the nature of reality is all peace and we're not feeling peace, that we know that we're dealing with Maya there. It's creating illusion in the minds of living beings. Being the very material, this is Maya again, being the very material of the many worlds, it is insentient. So everything that is perceptible by the senses or by the mind is insentient. They are only vehicles of consciousness. So think of a car. A car doesn't do anything by itself. Well, sorry, now that we've got AI cars, put that aside. It doesn't matter. These are vehicles for consciousness. So Maya undergoes transformation without ever losing its own identity. It is the seed that spawned the universe, which appears like a mirage before the mind and senses. Since it is the initial cause of manifestation, it acts in hundreds of ways, each of them with many permutations. So just think of unmanifested Prakriti. The gunas are in equilibrium. There are only seeds there. And actually, it's almost like the seed of seeds. The first transformation of Prakriti is the Mahat, the great cosmic mind. And that's the first transformation of Sattva. That's when the gunas first go out of equilibrium. And just imagine everything else in the realms of phenomena, not just this physical universe, but the causal realms, what we refer to as the heavenly realms, and other religions would have some sort of cosmology about realms that are not physical. All of that is a seed inside of the Mahat. And so think about that when you think of, since it is the initial cause of manifestation, it acts in hundreds of ways, each of them with many permutations. So, just starting with the 24 cosmic principles and all that effloresces out of that. It has no beginning, middle, or end, although Shankara will tell us that, we talked about this last time, that Maya has an end in self-realization, but because not all beings at the same time are self-realized, it will continue for them. All of its evolutes, everything that comes out of Maya, that evolves out, partake of its same nature, which means that it's changeless, it's changing, it's illusory, etc. It supports sense perception and activity in beings, so long as the results of past deeds are not exhausted or neutralized. So again, that's where we have that teaching that out of the Gita and otherwise, that everything that happens in Maya, including karma, is just part of nature. It's not part of the witnessing self. It's not part of Purusha. It's not part of the Atman. Because remember, the Purusha, according to those 10 fundamental tenets of Samkhya, is not an agent of action. So it can be recognized by the grace of God revealed in the illumined intellect. And it gives rise to the 7 malas: fascination, vainglory, attachment, dullness, despair, sorrows, varieties, distraction, delight, and pleasure. Okay, I know that went really fast, but we're moving forward so we can get to the 20 truths of truth. So all of this is showing the changeful nature of Maya. And so what is the antidote to that? The antidote is to look at that which is unchanging, which is inconceivable, which is without beginning and end. This says it has no beginning, middle, and end, but we have to take that within the context of relativity, which is where that belongs right there. So let me now bring up the chart. Well, actually, no, I want to talk about this a little bit. we're going to be seeing words, hearing words, things like achintya, incomprehensible, achyuta, indestructible, ananda, bliss, advaita, wonderful. We're going to be seeing all of these different words, and we're to hear them in terms of absolutes. So when we use these words to describe truth, it's always important to remember that these are not adjuncts to truth. These are the very nature of truth. And we hear this teaching when we're being taught about Sat, Chit, Ananda, which is often translated as existence, knowledge, and bliss, absolute. And that word Sat is variously translated as truth, reality, Brahman, okay, and also existence. So all of these are the same thing. When we talk about Sat Chit Ananda, these are not three different aspects of reality. These are the nature of reality. And one of the ways that they explain that in modern times is to talk about a Christmas tree. A Christmas tree is green, right? Or just talk about a tree that is green. And the greenness of the tree is not separate from the tree itself. It's not, it's part and parcel. It's the nature of the tree to be green. And if we use it like a Christmas tree, then we might hang ornaments on it. But the ornaments are adjuncts. They're not part of the tree. So that's an example of what we're not talking about. We're talking about the greenness. And so these 20 truths of truth are the greenness of the tree of truth. And the other thing that when we talk about Sat Chit Ananda, we can call it truth, awareness, and bliss. Again, these are not three separate things. When we get to these different ways of penetrating the meaning of truth, capital T, here, we might be tempted to think that it has nothing to do with pure consciousness or awareness, but that's not true. All of these, if we look at them deeply and take them into our minds and contemplate them, will help us unwrap the immediacy of awareness in everything that we experience. One of the verses that I almost chanted at the beginning of class was Pratibodha viditam matam amritatvam hivindate. Atmana vindate viryam vijayam vindate amritam. And the main word here, pratibodha viditam, is to intuit the Atman in and through every modification of the mind. So that means this consciousness is inherent in everything. In the Mandukya Upanishad, the verse that talks about Turiya, the fourth state of consciousness, in describing it, uses the phrase ekatma pratyaya saram, which means the essence of the one self-cognition present at all times. Okay, so that's what pratibodha viditam is referring to, only, we take it as this is our practice, to intuit it at all times. So as we take these up, we want to, and we're going to go through each one because we've got at least one person on the telephone, so they can't see this chart. But I want everyone to pick 2 or 3, and then we're going to take a few minutes and go silent so that we can contemplate them. And the purpose of this is that these are helpful for fathoming the unfathomable, examining our tendency in the mind to divide the undivided, Even when we think of the indivisible, it's like we define it in our mind by dividing, thinking of divisions and what's beyond that. It holds, we have a tendency, many of us, to hold ourselves apart from that which is immediate and direct. They will help us, if we contemplate these, they will help us not to conceptualize the inconceivable. So in a sense, we're doing what Ramprasad suggests in his poem, which is to say, try as hard as you can, O mind, to understand her. You never will, but your intelligence will be purified in the effort. Whoops. So here we go. We're going to do a share screen and start reading through these. We should start with Swamiji's quote here. He says, I will compare truth to a corrosive substance of infinite power. It burns its way in wherever it falls, in soft substances at once, in hard granite slowly, but it must. So that's what truth is like. And one of the first words that kind of epitomizes that is this word Advaita, wonderful. And these quotes here, these are taken from the 24 Aspects of Mother Kali, chapter 8. That's where you'll find the 20 Truths of Truth. Anyway, this word Advaita, wonderful, means, is described as, for all negativities, delusions, inconsistencies, and delusions are destroyed by its immaculate and all-powerful presence. So truth is wonderful, Advaita. Truth is incomprehensible, achintya. And the quote here is, the mind and senses depend upon external phenomena to aid in the comprehension of reality, whereas truth does not, being the very essence of transcendent reality. So mind and senses depend upon external phenomena to help it comprehend reality, but truth does not. It's a mass, you could say it's a mass of cognition. Sometimes they say, no, it's not that, but things are known as an instant. Holy Mother once said, does God create all at once? No. Does God create like a cookie cutter, piece by piece? No, it's all at once. And how is anything understood in reality? It's instantaneous. So, but it's not done with the mind. Okay, it is achyuta, indestructible, due to its complete independence from the realm of name and form, where death holds its sway. So it's beyond the realm of death. So it's indestructible. It's agada, unfathomable. It contains no limitation and defies all attempts to plumb its infinite depths. Unfathomable. So when something has no limitation, there's no way to fathom its infinite depths. Agrahya, it's inconceivable. No one can approach its pristine region without giving up all concepts and suppositions that are born of the mental process and therefore finite. So it's beyond that jumping off point of the intellect. And then akhanda, it's indivisible. One of Sri Ramakrishna's favorite expressions was akhanda satchidananda, the indivisible existence, knowledge, and bliss. So since its nature is one cohesive essence, The thought or possibility of fragmentation does not occur in it. Akshara, imperishable, because it pre-exists the manifestation and appearance of the universe, and in fact is the very basis for its existence. And this calls up a teaching of Sri Krishna in the Uddhava Gita, where he says that which exists before the universe and is there after the universe is the only thing that is existing at the time of the universe. That's all that exists. It is undecaying, akshaya. It is not mere longevity, Babaji says, that defines truth, but eternity. Amala, stainless. The quality of purity has an inherent attraction for those seeking higher truths, for it is in the purest atmosphere alone that lasting peace and contentment abide. Anadi Ananta, without beginning or end. And here, this is the absolute. It has no beginning and it has no end. Relativity does not impinge upon this. And Babaji says here, truth easily escapes the limiting constrictions of time and its accompanying adjuncts, such as birth and death, because it is anterior to life and mind. Now, you might find that some of these sound very similar, but they all carry a slightly different approach and flavor. Anirdeshya, indescribable. And here we have a quote from Sri Ramakrishna. Everything has been defiled by the tongue of mankind, even the scriptures. The truth of Brahman, however, can never be defiled, cannot be spoken. Here's one of my favorites. Anugraha, grace. And when I sit and contemplate these, I like to take anugraha and advaita together along with aparoksha. So anugraha, grace. The quote here is, only something so incredibly pristine could act as a medium to confer the holy presence and sweet will of the Lord and Mother. There's another way of looking at this grace, because truth is non-dual, right? Brahman, Nirguna Brahman, is non-dual. Existence is non-dual. All these things. Ananda, when we talk about it with the capital A, is non-dual. So when we talk about grace, we're often in the relative realm and we're praying for God's grace or hoping for grace. When we have that moment of grace that just pierces through the limitations of mind and expectation and all of that, it's a statement of non-duality. So I always think of grace and non-duality as going hand in hand. You know, Sri Ramakrishna says, the wind of God's grace is always blowing. And we just have to raise our sail to catch it. So grace is ever existent. So it's non-dual. Aparinami, truth is changeless. And this is a very powerful quote, I think, right here. It reveals both higher wisdom and secondary knowledge to be expressions of one indivisible reality and demonstrates the subtle principles of unity in diversity and action in inaction. And then here's aparoksha, immediate, direct. This powerful force of immediacy is ingrained in everything, whether recognized or not, whether acted upon or not. Truth is aprameya, immeasurable. The precious quality of truth, called aprameya, reveals the futility of ascribing or attributing boundaries to what is infinite. Truth is incomparable, apurva. There is nothing equal to it. Without truth, none of the divine qualities could exist. That's something to contemplate. It's arupa, formless. It stands as the eternal principle and abiding power within everything. And it is astula, subtle. Truth reflects best in matters directly pertaining to the spirit, capital S, and reveals the supramundane levels of consciousness. So think about last week when we were attending satsang with Babaji, and he was talking about the different levels of knowledge, because we've been discussing that during the Sunday classes, and talking about how, to rise out of the lower realms of knowledge, the darkened realms, and to come into the light of truth, requires that we put our minds on the teachings of the revealed scriptures. And so if we will just start doing that, then we will rise above naturally. We will naturally rise above those darker realms just by putting our minds on the truth. And this is how we rise out of rajas and tamas into sattva, and then eventually beyond sattva. Truth is avaikalya, perfect. After contemplating all things desirable, it appears to aspiring beings as the only authentic perfection in the 7 realms of existence. And finally, it is inexhaustible, for its strength is all inherent within itself. Nothing weak or inconsistent can attach to it, and no limiting adjunct can adhere to it. The first part of that, for its strength is all inherent within itself. So this is inexhaustible, just like the sun, in terms of this physical universe, is self-effulgent. It lights everything. Darkness is not possible within it. It's constantly, it's forever emitting light. In the same way, truth is the source of strength, and so strength always comes from it. All right, so everybody pick 2 or 3 of these, and it's important to pick more than one, I think. It's a suggestion. You go ahead and do what you want. But if you pick 2 or 3, it will unwrap. You'll have to pit them against each other a little bit and see how they augment this idea of truth. And we're going to take 5 minutes. I'll leave the screen showing, and I'm going to pause I'm going to pause, if I can find where the control is here, pause the recording, and we'll take 5 minutes and go ahead and deeply contemplate it. Don't worry about having to share it. I would suggest that if you have questions that arise or comments or insights that come to you, write them down and let's share them with Babaji on Saturday at satsang. So moving on, we're now going to shift gears and begin to take up the next verse. And the next verse, it reads this way. Due to barriers like the 9 distractions in spiritual life, doubt about my guru arose in my mind. But this was swiftly put to death when I heard of the 4 qualities of an authentic spiritual teacher. Now, we've actually studied both of these, but we're going to take them a little deeper. But before we do, I want to share something that I came across in my studies this week, and it's a new word and a new way of, actually, it's a couple of new ways of looking at things. To begin with, let's just back up a little bit. When we talk about the 9 distractions in spiritual life, it's those vikshepas again, those things like disease and illness, doubt, laziness, stodginess, heaviness, confusion, Bhranti darshana, confusion of philosophical confusion, and so forth, failing to, make it to samadhi, or making it and falling back, things like that. And in the Yoga Sutras, these 9 viparayas or vikshepas are talked about after samadhi and the different kinds of samadhi are introduced. And in the course of introducing the samadhis, they also talk about Ishvara Pranidhana. Now, we're all familiar with that term, Ishvara Pranidhana, in terms of surrender to God, or surrender of the fruits of actions, or self-surrender. And it means that in this section of the verses, which is in the first pada, it has more to do with concentration, and it's concentration, and also the samyama of concentration, meditation, and samadhi. So it has to do with those. But when the commentators are talking about it, they bring up this word that for me was new, I'll admit, and it's called bhavana. And as soon as you hear that word, if you've been around Sanskrit a little bit, you might think of, like the bhavas, the different moods and whatnot. So it kind of takes that flavor, but it has more to do with the way that we concentrate. So first, let me say a little bit more about this Ishvara Pranidhana in the way that they're using it. It means practicing the presence is one of the ways that they describe it. Practicing the presence of God. It means concentration, and it means to place oneself down in all humility and egolessness in the proximity of God, to dwell near and close to God, to surrender and place oneself at the disposal of God, even though one will not know the nature of God until one attains asampragyata samadhi, or nirvikalpa. Now they say it's not enough to surrender after the fact, but before, during, and after all actions. And one does this via bhavana. So what is bhavana? Bhavana is a special type of cultivated concentration. And it means, and I'm quoting, I'm pulling from Swami Veda Bharati in his coalescing of different commentators on the Yoga Sutras. He says it's a special type of cultivated concentration, which means impressing the object of concentration again and again onto the mind field by preventing any other object from entering the mind. That sounds like what we're doing when we're practicing pratyahara and trying to concentrate. He goes on, it is by bhavana that the form and nature of the object of meditation is completely realized, and realized so fully as to leave no residue of doubt or the possibility of these these vikshepas. So that was the point I was getting to. This practice of Ishvara Pranidhana, in the way that they're talking about it, as concentration with this special type of cultivated concentration, of impressing the object of concentration again and again on the mind, not just in meditation, but also in daily activities at all times, that when one reaches perfection in this, there is no possibility of those 9 distractions arising. And so that was kind of the main point for bringing these up. So since we have gone through them, I'm going to share the chart, let people see that chart again. And then we're going to focus on 2 in particular that are important with regards to this particular verse. Okay, so here they are laid out for us. They're the ones that are classed as physical, and Babaji says that it's Vedavyas himself that classed them this way. And then we see these mental ones, which are doubt, and that's the one that in particular our poet is talking about. He's saying that due to the 9 obstacles, the 9 vikshepas, a doubt arose in him with regard to the guru. So here's that doubt, and you can see that, you know, pramada would have a bearing on that doubt. If one is being careless about their practice, if one is feeling resistance to doing their practice or accepting the teachings, then, you know, that's going to feed into doubt. Why? Because these things are leading us back down into rajas. If we have alasya, idleness, heaviness, this is even heaviness of the body, this gets in the way. Avirati, this is like the opposite of uparati, which is self-settledness. It's immoderation of the senses. And when we are wasting our energy through the senses in the way that this is talking about, then, you know, that leads us, I mean, that was rajas that made us do that, right? And when we get oversatiated, tamas then comes. So those are the mental ones. The next one is the intellectual, the Bhranti darshana, which is confusion with regard to the philosophies. When we read misconception, delusion, and distortion, we might be tempted to think, you know, just in ordinary terms about it, but we're going to take it up today, more specifically with how it's impacted with regard to the scriptures and the teacher. And then these are the spiritual ones. Failure to attain ground, like being able to go from scattered mind to one pointed mind, and from one pointed mind into the samadhis. And then anavasti tattvani, we gain ground and then we fall back to it, fall back from it out of habit. So backsliding. And then before we leave this chart, the last time we looked into this, we didn't talk about these, the 4 causes of distraction. Here they're put as the 4 causes, but we can also talk about it in terms of being kind of a chicken and the egg thing. Basically, we're going to have all 4 of these going on if we're encountering these. And all of these, especially, all of these are the result of not maintaining sattva, of not maintaining discrimination between the eternal and the non-eternal, and being dragged back down again. So sorrow, I'm sorry for the person, Vicky, who's on the phone. Those 4 causes of distraction are sorrow, pain, distress, grief, unhappiness. That's one lot. The other one is similar, but it's kind of like a sour mind, depression. Dukkha is just any kind of sorrow and pain, suffering. And then darshanas is depression, despair, mental stress. Shakiness of limbs is the next one, angame jayatva, erratic vibration of the nerves. And then the other one, the final one, is unevenness of the in-breath and the out-breath. And the way, this gets talked about is the breathing is uneven, and we might find ourselves sighing or taking a quick breath or holding our breath. All of these things, they impede the ability to concentrate and meditate. So, and all of these always appear with these 9 distractions or 9 obstacles. And when we have any of these, then we have thought vibrations, vrittis, rising in the mind, which of course is what we're trying to quell in the practice of meditation so we can get into samadhi. So, with that introduction, let's take up samshaya and the rest of the mental vikshepas. So I want to make this very, very hands-on in terms of what happens when we're not in control of the gunas within us. In the beginning, we're told, well, the gunas are just part of nature, and they're going to show up in your mind. Rajas is restlessness, tamas is dullness, sattva is balance, but sometimes it's like complacency. It can be complacency. But we reach a point in our practice where, we want to have control over this. And that control might be just the ability to step back from it in the beginning. So when we have this problem of doubt, it means that we've been suffering, we've been on and off again in our practice. And again, we're taking this up in terms of the verse where this person is talking about, due to these 9 obstacles, he had doubt about his teacher. Now, he wouldn't be with, or she wouldn't be with their teacher if they hadn't been called. I mean, when I say called, they hadn't had this inspiration to be with the teacher originally, that they had sattvic experiences. They were in more of a clarity of mind. And when that fell off, then it allowed the rajas to rise and tamas to rise. And when that happens, we get, these doubts arise. And so I was thinking about this and thinking how Westerners are, as Westerners, we're raised to value our gut feelings and our intuitions that are very often based on emotions. And sometimes we are told to follow our heart, which is usually the emotional heart or the sentimental heart. And other times we're told to follow our head. But until we have attained, what Krishna calls sthiti pragyasya, this steady wisdom, which means that we are established in at least sattva and established in higher sattva, really, in steady wisdom and peace, then we're going to be vacillating between rajas and tamas, and then coming up into a little more clarity with sattva and coming back down again. And if while we're struggling to get in that balanced position, think of a seesaw, and you've got rajas on one side, sattva on the other, tamas on the other, and sattva in the middle, and you're trying to balance, this is the lower sattva, and you're trying to balance. Higher sattva is beyond that seesaw, and you're trying to balance. And if one's discrimination isn't honed, then the intensity of a sattvic inspiration is going to seem to be equal to a rajasic or tamasic urge. And so then people who will at one point laud and praise their teacher, and then the next, 6 months later, they run away, or if we talk about the scriptures, it's the same thing. At one moment, the scriptures they're getting a lot of joy, pleasure out of reading the scriptures, and then they fall down and they can't get anything out of it. They put it down and don't pick it up again. So this is the problem with not maintaining our practice, not staying close to the teacher, and not maintaining a sense of objectivity and discrimination. So what does Sri Ram say? Ignorance persists in the absence of discriminative knowledge. So we always have to keep this discrimination going. And one of the benefits of knowing this list of 9 obstacles and understanding the gunas and how they work is that we can step away and go, oh, I'm resisting what the scriptures are saying, or what my teacher is saying, because I've fallen into rajas and tamas. The problem is here because the teacher is, if it's an authentic teacher, is always even, always in sattva. So, in this way, I've already broached the problem with Bhranti Darshana. Now, in the studies that I was doing in the last week or so on Bhranti Darshana, I heard it in a different, I saw it presented in a different way. Maybe it wasn't a different way, I just heard it in a different way. And it had more to do with how, under the influence of Bhranti Darshana, which is, it's defined in the study that I was reading as confusion of philosophy, that the person does not heed the tradition, does not heed the revealed scriptures, does not heed what the guru, the authentic guru is saying, the illumined teachers of the tradition. They listen to their ego, they go their own way. And this is one reason why the Indian scriptures always, and I'm going to call this up here, the Indian scriptures insist upon these 3 great sources. And in order to test your knowledge and to know that you have reached the correct conclusion, because what we're talking about here is the problem of reaching the wrong conclusion in yourself and not getting it authenticated by the revealed scriptures, by an authentic preceptor, to bounce it off of what you think is your own direct experience. So this is really important. So, Bhranti Darshana, it calls forth, those evolutes of Maya that we looked at last time. Remember Vritti Jnana, this is knowledge from the thought waves of the mind only. It's like an intellectual frame of reference only. And then Dosha Dristi, which is always seeing fault, and Tarkika Buddhi, which is argumentative intellect, and then Pratiloma, which is resistance to harmony, to peace. All of these seem to combine in this vikshepa of Bhranti darshana. These two, Bhranti darshana and doubt, are the most difficult ones to overcome in spiritual life. So, any questions at this point? Because the next step is to go into the 4 qualifications or qualities of an authentic teacher, and we don't have time to do that. And, you know, in a sense, Babaji will be going through that this Sunday when he starts talking about the 7 upper levels of knowledge. We'll begin to hear some of those, even if he doesn't point them out. So, yeah, so are there any questions or comments at this point? All righty then. I'll let you all go early. All right, let me close with a prayer. Om Masato Masadgamoya, Masuma Jyotir Gamoya, Mrichor Ma Amritam Gamoya, Abhira Bhira Mayeti, Rudrayate Dakshinam Mukam, Penamam Pahinicham, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Lead us from lower truth to higher truth. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from the illusion of death to realization of eternal existence. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother of the universe, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all living beings. Om Hari Om Tat Sat.